Welcome to Courtside Moms. I'm your host, Wendy Sparks. This week, I'm speaking to Lisa Green, mother of Isaiah Austin. Isaiah was an NBA first-round prospect who, days before the 2014 draft, was diagnosed with Marfan Syndrome, a rare disorder affecting his heart and instantly ending his NBA dream. This is a very special episode and is a story of perseverance, determination, and a mother's unwavering love. Hope you enjoy.
Naturally. I do it naturally, baby.
Thank you, Lisa, so much for coming here today. I really appreciate you wanting to share your story about yourself, your family, and of course, your son, Isaiah. I think it's really important for people to understand Isaiah then and Isaiah today. So tell us, from your perspective, who is Isaiah?
In a number of words, I think he's overly passionate. I think he is tenacious. He's driven. He doesn't give up. So I think those are some characteristics that, I could say looking at him now, I'm very proud of who he's become. The overly passionate part is because he's so competitive, obviously being an athlete. But I think, he's overcome so much in his life and the hurdles that, life has thrown him at such a young age,
Right.
that he, really made lemonade out of lemons. So I'm very proud of him for that.
Speaking of young age, let's jump back a bit. How long was he at birth?
I think I had him a month early. I just couldn't hold him anymore.
Yeah. No room.
And he was almost 23 inches long. So he's always was a big boy.
Yeah.
I think at 4 years old, I could wear his house shoes around the house. I mean, I don't have a big foot, but, I have, size 6.5, 7. So at 4 years old, I could fit his shoes. So that's kind of crazy. Yeah, so he's always been a big boy.
So growing up, was he uncomfortable with his size?
No, on his biological father's son side, all of his cousins are very tall. He had female cousins that are 6'5".
Wow.
So it's almost like the land of the giants. So he was very comfortable when he grew up. We lived in Fresno, California.
Right.
And so his cousins lived there as well. And so he was just kind of in the mix of everybody. So it was very normal for him. His grandfather was almost 7 feet tall.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was the land of the giants. I was just the miniature person there.
I guess I don't have to ask where he got his height from.
No.
How did he dress with that at school with his classmates? I'm assuming you didn't have many kids that were as tall as him in school.
Yes. Because he's always been athletic, he was kind of a standout,
Right.
So he was a bright student as well, very smart. But because he was so athletic, he was very popular. So he could walk into a room and people would gravitate towards him. I think it's kind of his personality too. He is an extrovert, so he gains energy from
Right.
people. So he loves that place and that attention.
What sports did he play as a child?
He played everything. He was in karate. I mean, he really tried everything. He played football. He played basketball. He was a great baseball player as well.
Wow.
So, he was a pitcher and first baseman. So they won championships on that as well. So I think, basketball was kind of always his passion, his
Right.
first passion. I remember at 3 years old, he was dribbling the basketball in the house nonstop. And we put him in little hoopsters. I think you had to be like 5 to be in the little hoopsters in California, but no one questioned it because he was so tall.
He already had the height.
And at 4 years old, first time bringing the ball down the court, he was dribbling between his legs. And people were like, who is that? I didn't even know you could do that. I was like, oh, I don't even know. It's kind of crazy.
That's amazing because we don't really pay attention to these things. We don't really pay attention to
No.
these things. We just, this is my son and he's playing and it is what it is until someone
Exactly.
says, well, hold on a second. He's a little bit more
Advanced.
advanced than all the other kids on the court. So
Yeah, it was crazy.
when did you realize, like, hold on a second, he has a special skill with basketball. Let's do something with this.
I never pressured him into basketball. It was what he loved to do, and he played it nonstop. So the kids from the neighborhood would come. We had an outside hoop. They would always be playing. I think he was always very tall, but he always wanted to be the point guard. So he could really dribble, which was, kind of uncommon for a tall guy. Yeah. So he was very, he could dribble, he could shoot 3-pointers. So I think he was very versatile. So I thought, maybe he has some talent there. And of course, I showed him how to do the jump shot because I played basketball in high school.
Who else is going to learn? Come on now. You're only going to learn from
Ask
the mom.
him that too. He'll tell you.
Oh, so there's truth behind that.
It is, yes. I think he's quoted that a couple times, that his mom showed him how to shoot the basketball. So, yeah.
Oh, I tell everybody that I taught Kim, but that's not true.
I was kind of an athlete when I was younger too, so I love basketball. It was my first love as well.
Right.
I played volleyball too, but I didn't have that vertical, talent that you can't teach.
That's amazing. I too used to play volleyball and basketball. Mm-hmm. So I was a spiker in volleyball, and then in basketball I was a guard. Yeah. But Kim was a natural talent. It had nothing to do with me.
I always loved it though, so that's the great thing, because going to his games, I could he traveled, I could call the plays as well, so it was kind of fun.
That coach in the stands,
right?
Yeah. They should have hired you, right? Kind of
exactly.
thing. Yeah. Did he play basketball in school?
Oh yes,
for a team.
Yes, he did all through grade school. I mean, they won championships because of him all through high school. And then, of course, in the summer, he was on AAU team. So,
okay. What was different about Isaiah when you compared to the other players when he was playing?
Well, I have to tell you that in middle school, he was actually dunking a basketball. And when he came down, he said he saw a sheet of red. And, when we were think back about it, we're like, oh, that's kind of odd. And maybe his adrenaline was so high because it was at a big game. And he had a major dunk, in 8th grade. So, everybody stood up. And but the next morning he said, Mom, I still can't see it out of that eye. And so we took him to an eye doctor right away, and they said, oh my gosh, he has a detached retina. This is a very severe case of detached retina. So I was actually headed to Florida, and I turned around from Florida with my job and flew right back. And they said that he had to have emergency surgery, but they wanted to wait for the best eye doctor in Dallas, which was Dr. Kozlik, and he performed the surgery. So at that time, thinking, people have detached retinas, not really a big deal. And looking back at it, I think it happened in a baseball. He had a really severe baseball injury that hit directly in his right eye. That was a couple years prior to that, but they said that could happen, and we just never thought about it again, right? And so, but it was severe, and they reattached his retina. He had to lay face down for months. So we had a contraption in our house, almost like the when you get a massage at the mall and you have to lay face down, we had to have a chair like that. We had to have an extension on his bed where he could only sleep on his stomach. He had to do his schoolwork at home, so he couldn't go to school. We hooked up a mirror so he could actually see the TV looking down. So it was quite traumatic.
And he had multiple surgeries.
He did. So the first surgery didn't take, and so he had another surgery. And all in all, you after each surgery, you just pray that this is going to be the one that brings back his sight. And after 4 surgeries, and all 4 were unsuccessful, he said, no more. I can't deal with any more surgeries. So it was very painful for him as well. And so that was the time where we had to come to the reality that he's only going to be able to see out of one eye. And, in 8th grade, it's tough. You're already known. He was known nationally. He was 6'8" in 8th grade, one of the top players in the nation, Adidas Nations. He was with that. And, here I have this child, literally he's a child, and, he's laying in my arms crying. He's saying, what's next? He's like, I can't play. And I said, it's tough as a mom. You want to fix things and you can't fix it. And I said, sorry.
No, it's fine.
You have 2 choices in life. You make it your excuse, and people will have empathy.
Yeah.
Or you make it your story, and you move on. And he looks at me. He's like, okay, Mom. He's like, I think I can make it my story. And I said, you can. But I said, if you make it your story, you can never make it your excuse. Like, we can't make it an excuse.
Right.
He's like, okay. He looks at me. He's like, okay, Mom. He's like, I think I'm going to be McDonald's All-American. I said, oh, geez. Now what did I do? 20 kids in the nation gets to be McDonald's All-American, right? Here he only can see out of one eye. I'm like, okay, baby. I feel like, how our parenting is. This is what we tell our kids.
Yes.
You can, you will, you did. So it was never an opportunity or a question if he could or could not. Now it was our time to show him that, there's no other choice. If that's what you want, you have to really work hard to get to that point. So you can, you will, you did. That's always been our motto. And we continue to tell our kids that today. And so, he trained really hard. What people don't know is we didn't publicize this because, we didn't know what his opportunities were going to be. And we felt like if he could play, then prove it to people he could play. They didn't need to understand any of the other piece of it. And people didn't know that we would line up glasses on our kitchen table, and we would sit there and practice him pouring a glass of water into a glass because he had no depth perception.
Right.
He would walk through the doors and always hit his right shoulder because he couldn't figure out where he was. To shake somebody's hand, we had to practice that because of the depth perception. Right. So much he had to overcome. We had a basketball court outside, and we built that because of his situation. And he would be out there for hours and hours shooting. And it almost became like a reflex. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not so much that a distance thing, but a muscle reflex for him. It was almost like that's how he learned to play again. And so when he got back onto the court, and now you have this 7'1" kid that's shooting threes, and I would hear people criticize, oh, he needs to be in by the basket. And I'm thinking to myself, you have no idea what it took him to get to this point where he could shoot a three, but I couldn't say anything.
Right.
So that was the hard part. But for him to get to that point, not only did he become a McDonald's All-American, he became Jordan Brand Classic. I mean, he had in 11th grade as a junior, he was the number one player in the nation with one eye, and nobody knew.
Eye. When did he decide to tell people that he's been playing with one eye?
Actually, he didn't. When he went to Baylor, and I honestly think the reason why he went to Baylor is because of the fact, I think there were, his close friends knew, of course, and whoever coached him at the time knew because they would have to make plays specifically because of him. He had no peripheral vision out of his right side. And so they made special plays for him. He learned to, play with his head on a swivel, he would often say. Like, he can see everything, but it's very different from a normal person because he really has to learn how to turn his head. And so Scott Drew, once we got to Texas in 8th grade, he was always at Isaiah's game. He built a relationship, him and Coach Mills, but they built a relationship early on with Isaiah. It's not when he was in high school and his ranks were, high and he was a 5-star player, whatever the case may be. They already built that. At the time, even his prep school told Isaiah, you have to at least come down to top 10 schools. Because at this point, we're getting so much mail, it actually broke the school mailbox. They're like, we can't continue to get all these letters. And so, he chose Baylor. I think for A, it was close to home. It was less than an hour from where we lived. And then B, Coach Drew Mills, they established a relationship with him. And, when he signed, we let them know, Isaiah can't see. They're like, we don't care. He's already proven himself that he can play, and that was kind of it. But we didn't tell anybody until he came out for the draft because his agent said, if you continue to hide this, they're going to ask, what else are you hiding?
Right.
And there's nothing else that we were hiding. We didn't hide it, per se, to be sneaky. We hid it, per se, to say, if he's good enough, give him a chance.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely. So here now, when he declared for the draft, you were preparing for him to be possibly the first NBA player to be drafted with a disability.
Absolutely.
So he would have made history.
Yeah, he would have. And it's kind of funny, as a freshman, he could have came out and been a lottery. He was projected to be a lottery pick as a freshman. He stayed an additional year as a sophomore because he needed shoulder surgery, and he felt like he wanted to be stronger. He had a great sophomore year as well, made Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, all these accolades. And then when he came out and told his story that he had one eye, he was all across the draft boards. Now they didn't believe him, that he could have been a lottery pick the year before without knowing.
Right.
Now they knew. They said, can you play at the next level? And that's what was very disheartening for him. Teams called for him. He had a lot of private showings, and his agent at the time said, you know what, this kid is remarkable. They've had teams call him back and said, you know what, this is a sleeper of the draft. I know he's ranked low first round now, maybe second round, sometimes off the draft boards, but they said whoever gets this one gets a lot of talent, and he will be a sleeper. At that time, we knew that he was going to go first round for sure.
Right.
One of the teams definitely wanted to draft him, so that was exciting for us. Okay. So you know what? That's life. You have to continue to prove yourself to people.
Absolutely. Now with him deciding that it's time to declare, you have to go through physicals.
Yes.
Tell me about that process for Isaiah.
Yes. So when he was going to declare his freshman year, I ended up taking a job in Kansas because I thought, you know what, he's going to be in the draft. He's the projected lottery pick. Who knows where he's going to be? So it's perfect timing for me to take my next step in my career. So we actually sold our house and moved to Kansas. Now, if I would have known he was going to stay another year, I wouldn't have taken that job. Right. But, things happen, life happens. And so So he gets the call to the NBA Combine, and I said, Isaiah, this is so exciting because now, like I said, he's all over the draft boards. Who knows where he's going to be? I said only 60 kids in the world get invited to this Combine, so be happy that you're even invited. Sure. And he calls me and said, Mom, they want to do this extra testing. They want to test me for Marfan Syndrome. And I kind of hesitated and I laughed. I said, oh, Isaiah, don't worry about it. I said, they probably do that with all the tall players. I said, this is what I know. God's brought you this far. He won't let you down, period.
That's right.
So get it out of your mind. Do what you need to do. And he's like, okay. And he had excellent workouts and didn't think twice about it.
Did you know what Marfan syndrome was at the time?
I did. You know what? When he was about 11 years old, one of his doctors said, he might have Marfan syndrome. And we had taken him to, at that time, we lived in Minnesota. Right. And this is right before we moved to Texas. And he went to Minnesota's Children's Hospital. And he had a long, extensive, they did ultrasound on his heart. They did an extensive look at everything, and they said they ruled it out at that time. So for me, literally, I didn't think he had it because I'm thinking to myself, he was already checked when he was 11. Right. This is just probably one of the things I had to do.
Tell me now about the call you received a few days before the draft.
Yeah. So I'm driving home, and the NBA doctor calls me and said, you know what, Lisa, I have some disheartening news to tell you. Isaiah tested positive for Marfan syndrome, and at this time, he's going to have to withdraw from the draft. He will not be able to play basketball ever in his life. And I'm thinking to myself, this has got to be a joke. Yeah. Seriously, this kid's been through so much. He's proven himself. He needs to be at this level. This is what he's really planned his whole life around at this point. And, I just started crying. I'm like, how am I going to tell this child this? When I just told him on the phone, don't worry about it, right? Yeah. And I couldn't even drive home. And I finally get home, and I walk in, and my husband looks at me. He's like, what? Did you get in an accident? And I told him. He's like, you've got to be kidding. I'm like, no. He's like, get the kids. He's like, we're driving to Texas. So we gathered our kids. We didn't even take anything, and we drove to Texas. Now, at the time, Holly Rowe from ESPN, she's the one that actually did the story.
Yes.
Releasing the fact that he was blind in his right eye. So I called Holly Rowe, and I said, you're not going to believe this. And she's like, you've got to be kidding me. she's like, we're going to have to, she's like, I don't want this to be a ticker on ESPN, we're going to do a story. And I said, we haven't even told him yet. And she's like, tell him, because this was a Friday. She's like, you have to tell him on Saturday, we're going to be there in Texas. On Sunday, we're going to release the story and do a story on it. And I said, okay. And so, the whole way ride, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. I don't, at that point, I was thinking to myself, how is he going to react?
Yeah.
It's so deep and it's so dark. I mean, it was almost worse than having a death in the family.
Yeah.
Because this is what he worked for so long. And, even when your parents die, it's like a life cycle. It's still sadness, but it's eventually going to happen. Yeah. This is something that, how do you fix it as a parent? How do you get through after all this motivation and inspirational, upbringing you give to them and then just being completely let down again? So it was really a hard time to try to figure out. And my husband, who's the stepfather, but he calls him dad. He's raised him since he's 3. How do you tell a child? And my husband now was an athlete. He was a world-class runner.
Right.
As an athlete, he's like, you can't do that. I will never tell a child they can't play. And so to this day, he's never told them he can't play. So it was really hard. We called Scott Drew and I said, you know what, let's just get as many people that love him in a room. So if he wants to harm himself, I mean, everything was going through my mind, like how is he going to take this?
Yeah.
So he would have enough support to lift him back up.
As a mother, our role is to protect our kids from anything in the world. They fall on the playground and they scratch themselves.
Or fix it, right?
Well, of course, that's where we have to fix it. That's what we're there to do. And here you are faced with this situation where there's nothing you can do to fix it. You cannot remove this syndrome that he's been diagnosed with.
No.
Can you please share with us, what is Marfan Syndrome?
It's a connective tissue disorder. So connective tissue is what holds our body together. And so a lot of times, they talk about detached retinas. To this day, I'm not sure if that's what really gave him a detached retina because like I said, he had a severe eye injury from a baseball.
Right.
But maybe it was because the surgeries didn't take. I don't know. But they were afraid that his aortic valve would expand and explode, and that's where players actually collapse and die. That was their worry because his aortic valve was just slightly larger than what a normal person would be. So that's why they ruled him that he couldn't play anymore.
Take us to Dallas now, where the family arrives, your support system arrives, and now you have to look your son in the eye and tell him this news.
Right. So he was with his coach, Coach Ray. They had Coach Ray knew, and so he took him for the day until we could gather everybody. The whole Baylor team came, like all the coaches, everybody. And he walked into the room. I didn't even have to tell him. He just looked at me. He knew. And a 7-footer just balling up and just like lifeless. And I can remember him walking into the bathroom and my husband went in with him. Then he comes out and he's like, okay, next steps. And just like that, he turned it around. And I thought to myself, what? Like, this kid is just unbelievable. And later on, when I talked to him about it, he's like, Mom, I couldn't let myself break.
Right.
I had my younger brother and sister who look up to him. And I think, looking back, they saved his life.
I've been watching so much videos about him talking about this and talking about this whole experience. And he's how old?
He just turned 26. Yeah, he's still a baby.
Your son is such an inspiration to a lot of people because I'm thinking, wow, like how do you handle that at such a young age?
Yeah.
He was young. He's a teen and he's dealing with this dream and the understanding that I can't do this. Right. Even it's not he's not living his dream because he wasn't good enough, or he's not living his dream because of anything other than the fact
Yeah.
of a health issue. And it's
That you can predict. I mean,
Yeah.
he played elite basketball all of his life, never had any symptoms at all. And even looking back at, coming out of high school, top 3, would he have been top 1 if he had 2 eyes?
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Who knows? His talent is just unmatched. Being able to do, I drive sometimes closing my right eye thinking, how does he even, just normal things people do is just kind of crazy. I mean, even in high school and in college, sometimes he would go to the gyms early just so he could figure out the depth of the basket, because the wall was closer to the basket in some gyms than others.
Right.
So, there's certain things that he had to do when no one else was looking to be able to perform like he did. So, it was kind of crazy, but I think, getting through that phase was really incredible.
You received a call from the NBA commissioner, Adam Silver.
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He didn't call me. He actually reached out to Isaiah, and I think he knew that a team was going to draft him in the first round.
Right.
And so he asked us if we wanted to come and celebrate the draft. And, that was going to be up to Isaiah. But when you look back at it, all those top kids were all of his friends. Yeah. Even if they didn't go to high school together, they were in the elite, camps together all summer since they've been 11 years old, right? So these were some of his best friends. And for him, he wanted to celebrate his brothers that were able to get on to the next level. That was his dream. So he said yes. It was pretty cool. That was really special. And then, Adam Silver promised Isaiah he will always be part of the NBA family. So, after he finishes degrees, he only has 2 classes left. So, and he came out as a sophomore. So he's worked at this. So he only has 2 classes left to get his degree. And then, eventually he can work for the NBA if that's his choice.
Last night, I was talking to my son and I asked him if he remembered Isaiah. And he said to me, "Of course I do." Same draft.
Yeah.
And I was saying to myself, I remember the story, but sort of not remember the story, because we were facing our own adversity where the same draft, and here my son, we realized he's not going to get drafted. What do you do? And he said to me, every player goes through different things. And he was like, but Isaiah went through something completely different. And he kept saying, I felt so bad for him. I remember talking to the other guys about it, saying, hey, you know what I mean? We're lucky now. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he didn't get drafted, but it's a whole different
still
story.
can play.
He can play. Exactly. Like, I can play anywhere I choose to, where here you have such a talented player and he cannot.
Right. And so, that was, he was invited to so many things. And the Today Show, there's just so much that was going on. He wrote a book after that. Yes. He went on and spoke to not only middle school, but high school. And he went to and spoke at a American Heart Association with the top heart doctors there. So he's had these, great opportunities. But it was also a very dark time for him, because he was still in the process of mourning. And when things go away and all those speaking engagements, and he finally has some downtime, those were some deep, dark times. And so as a mom, I just needed to hear his voice to assure me that he's still on this earth for the most part. But it was tough, and then, he has his doctors, Dr. Liang, who's he's at Stanford University, has been in charge of the Marfan Center there for the last, I would say, 25 years. So he's the best of the best. And he's the one that released Isaiah to play with reasonable risk. Now, with Marfan Syndrome, just like everything else, like autism, there's a spectrum. There's mild cases and there's, not mild cases. So even when we've been involved in the Marfan conference, you can see some extreme measures. Isaiah doesn't have a lot of those symptoms, right? He's never had any symptoms. And, with Dr. Ling, he said, he has reasonable risk to play. If that's what he wants to do, as long as he's under doctor's care, I don't see where there's an issue. And so that's when Isaiah, went back to playing. Of course, the NBA, won't accept him to play, for various reasons. And I, as a businesswoman, I understand that. But he has the opportunity now to play overseas. So he's been playing for the last 2 years. So that's been very exciting for him.
Why do you think the basketball clubs overseas will allow him to play?
I don't think it's as strict. And you know what? It's a high profile story in the U.S. Happened here. He was drafted into the NBA family. So I think when people, they didn't even understand what Marfan Syndrome was or never heard of it before. But with Isaiah bringing that light to, the syndrome, now at least if you mention it, they're like, oh yeah, I remember Isaiah. You know what I mean? So I think it's just different. And they have different rules and regulations. He's still under doctor care. And, as long as Dr. Liang allows him, I'm like, it's who he is now. Like, at least he's happy. And, as a parent, what you realize and the one lesson you learn in life is that you're only as happy as your saddest child. And for a long time,
that is beautiful.
I wasn't happy.
I look at you and I say, you're such a strong person. I don't know how, I don't understand how you could have faced all these adversities, been strong for your son, and keep yourself together because, like I said, you're the mom.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can't, or we shouldn't allow our kids to see us break because if we break, it's over.
Exactly. And they don't believe then. You know what I mean?
You're unbreakable. Yeah, we're invincible, apparently, right? But, and here I'm talking to you now, and I've never met your son, but I'm looking at the interviews and reading it, and you're like one and the same. Like you both have such big hearts. Yeah. And I could see the strength behind his story and him getting up. Okay, forget it. This is it. I'm going to do this. And like you said,
very
you know
driven.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I read a long time ago, you have a choice to be the victim or the victor. Yeah. And he chose to be the victor. And his story is so fascinating. And he still has this, I don't know if I should say threat, but that's just what it is. Yeah. And he's going to live his life to the fullest. And I just think that is just so, like, God bless him. It's I can imagine for you being scary at times and what's going to happen and what's he going to do. And like, I just don't even know what to say. I don't know what to say. And
I guess another thing that you learn is, happiness isn't given to you. You make that choice. Right. And so we had to make a choice that we needed to be happy with the things that we had and whatever life threw at us. And we were a unit, Yeah. I call us 5 stars. There's 5 of us in our family. Well, now there's 7. But I mean, I feel like as long as we're a unit, nothing can defeat us. Right. And, with all of our kids, we've, all of them have different issues. And it's so funny. People look at my social media. They're like, oh my gosh, you have a great family. I'm like, I'm a person who chooses to celebrate the accomplishments of my kids, right, or great things. I don't air out our dirty laundry because everybody has theirs. Nobody wants to be sad, right? Yeah. So my kids have accomplished a lot, but I choose to share those things. But all of them had their own issues and their own hurdles that they have to go through. God has a journey for all of us. What we decide to do is kind of our choice, but we have to choose to be happy and to be grateful.
Absolutely. Where is he playing now?
He's in Taiwan. So he's in the Asian League, getting 40 points a game. He's living life and being able to see the world as well.
Wow. Does it really affect him that he cannot play in the NBA?
It did at first, I think, especially when his doctor released him. But now he's kind of, at peace with it. Right. He's being able to see the world. He still gets to do what he loves. There's a lot of great players that are overseas, and the talent is enormous over there as well. So he still gets that, I guess that altitude of play
Right.
and elite players. So I think he's satisfied that he had one dream is to
Right.
play. So whether he plays, the only
right.
difference is what court he's playing on at this
Pretty
point.
much. Or what country.
Exactly.
He's just not in the NBA, but he's still living
Exactly.
his dream as a pro basketball
Yep.
player. What does Isaiah have planned for his future?
Now that he has a son, he's 2.5, and he's like the light of my life. I think he's trying to decide. He wants to have a great future with him, whether he goes on. He definitely will finish his degree, 2 classes, whether he chooses to work with the NBA or chooses to coach or whatever the case may be. I think he will always be around the game. I think that's where his heart is. I think I don't see him doing anything else besides being part of that piece of who he is. But like I said, he's multi-talented. I mean, when he does these speeches and inspirational talks, I mean, he was in front of American Heart Association, and I'm not even kidding you. 10 minutes before he was to go up and speak, he leans over and says, "Mom, what should I talk about?" I almost died. I'm like, these are the number one heart surgeons in America, and you're asking me right now what you should talk about? I said, "You didn't prepare for this?" He's like, "No." I said, "Well, just tell him about your story." He's like, "Mom, everybody knows that." I'm like, "I don't know, Isaiah." I was like, I wanted to walk out. But then he gets up there 10 minutes later and he talks for 20 minutes. And the only criticism that was out there is, why didn't they have tissues on the table? Like, these heart surgeons were crying and very emotionally taken aback from what he had to tell them about. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, he has such a gift to communicate and to just have this emotional connection with whatever age, whether it's second graders or middle school kids, high school, or, some nationally known heart surgeons. So he knows who his audience is, and he can play that. He's always has that gift. He's very articulate. So I don't know. He has so much talent. I'm excited to see what his future holds, to be honest.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. We're all excited. As a mom, I have to say, congratulations. You raised such a fantastic human being. Like, you really did. If you were to have one word to describe him now, just one, what would that word be?
Passionate.
Wow.
With whatever he does, he's passionate, whether he's on the court, very competitively passionate, whether he's talking about his family now, his son, his girlfriend, very passionate, whether he talks about his family, his siblings, or myself and his dad. So he's very passionate.
My word for your son is powerful, because he just exerts so much, and he probably doesn't even realize.
He doesn't.
He's probably saved so many lives with his Marfan Syndrome. With now, there's families saying, "Hold on a second, let me go check." Mm-hmm. And his voice speaks volumes to people as he tells his story.
Yes.
So that is my word for
I love that. And being able to, pick yourself back up. And he's had to do that number of times, not just once, 4 times during the surgery, relearning how to practically walk again in terms of, with no depth perception, to being a force on the court again, to now he's a fantastic dad. So it's nice to see him in that role too, because for the first time in his life, he has to think about someone besides himself. Right. And as you know, as a mother, when kids are growing up, they have one person in mind, it's themselves. So it's not until you get older do you realize there's other people attached to that, and they're just as important. But he sees that now, and it's nice to see. He's a really great dad.
Lisa, please tell me, what advice would you give to other mothers?
I guess my advice would be, even as emotional or sad as the situation is, you have to be that one to pick them up. And so there's many nights when I would take a lot of showers because it was the only time I could cry and no one hears me or no one could see my tears. But I did that on my own time. The other times I was hard as rock, right? Saying, yes, you can do it, like you can, you will, you did, has always been our motto. you can't think of anything else. We have to do it. And other than that is to put God first. If it wasn't for our faith, I don't know how we would have done it as well. But I understand God has a different journey for all of us. We might have our lives planned, and then he's like, no, that's not the direction I was going to take you. And we have to accept that, and we still have to find gratitude and happiness wherever that journey takes us.
I wish you, your family, Isaiah, everybody, just so much love. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you in the future. I would like to keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Hear more about
Us
Isaiah.
basketball moms, we
Of
have
course,
to.
Of course. And thank you so much for sharing this story. It's a blessing because you sit here and you're so strong. Like, you're a beautiful woman, like inside and out. And just to go through all this, you know what I mean? Like you're saying, God put us on this planet and he gives us certain things, and you handled it as you should. And
There's many days I didn't think I could do it, but you know, like they say, he gives his toughest soldiers the hardest journey. So I guess we're pretty tough.
Well, we say, with God before us, who stands against us?
Right.
So thank you so much for sharing your story on Courtside Moms.
Thank you for having me.
To know more about Marfan Syndrome, please go to www.marfan.org. And please also follow Isaiah on Instagram at Isaiah Austin. To stay connected with us, please follow us on all social media platforms at Courtside Moms. And don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends so they too can learn about the professional basketball players that we all know and love. See you next time on Courtside Moms.
Anything you want done, baby, I do it naturally.